The massive transport ship Galactic Unity hummed with the conversations of dozens of species as it approached the neutral station orbiting Kepler 442b. Marcus Chun pressed his face against the viewport, watching the enormous structure grow larger. At barely 5 feet tall and weighing only 140 pounds, he was dwarfed by nearly every other passenger aboard the vessel. A deep rumble of laughter echoed behind him. "Look at the tiny thing trying to see out the window," came the translated voice of a Corvanian warrior. The 8-foot-tall reptilian creature's scales gleamed under the ship's artificial lighting. "What is that little pest even doing on a diplomatic mission?" Marcus didn't turn around. He'd heard similar comments for the past 3 days of travel. As the youngest and smallest member of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, he was used to being underestimated. At 25, he had already mastered 12 alien languages and completed advanced degrees in xenobiology and interspecies relations. But none of that mattered to most aliens who judged based on physical appearance. "I heard humans are supposed to be some kind of apex predator species," laughed a Thackeray delegate, her forearms gesturing dismissively. "If that little one is what Earth considers dangerous, their planet must be filled with harmless creatures." The Corvanian warrior, whose name tag read Commander Vexthal, approached Marcus with heavy footsteps. "Hey, tiny human," he growled, placing a clawed hand on Marcus's shoulder with just enough pressure to be uncomfortable. "When we reach the station, try not to get stepped on. I'd hate to accidentally crush Earth's finest diplomat." Marcus finally turned, looking up at the towering alien with calm brown eyes. "I appreciate your concern for my safety, Commander. I'll be sure to watch where I'm going." The simplicity of his response seemed to amuse the surrounding aliens even more. A crystalline being from Zephyria chimed melodically, such politeness from such a small package. How refreshing. As the ship prepared to dock, Marcus gathered his modest belongings. Unlike the other delegates who traveled with entourages and mountains of equipment, he carried only a single bag containing his translation devices, diplomatic credentials, and a few personal items. The other passengers continued their conversations about the upcoming negotiations, most ignoring Marcus entirely. The diplomatic mission to Kepler Station was crucial for establishing trade routes through the contested Veil Nebula. 3 major galactic powers, the Corvanian Empire, the Thackeray Confederation, and the crystalline Zephyrian Collective, had been locked in territorial disputes for decades. Earth, as a newer member of the galactic community, had been invited to mediate due to their reputation for creative problem-solving, though many questioned whether such a young species could handle such complex negotiations. As they disembarked, Marcus found himself swept along in a sea of much larger beings. The station's artificial gravity was slightly heavier than Earth standard, making his already challenging situation more difficult. Automated announcements echoed through the corridors in dozens of languages, directing delegates to their assigned quarters. The main diplomatic quarters were arranged around a central hub, with each species given accommodations suited to their environmental needs. Marcus's room was modest but comfortable, with adjustable atmosphere controls and a workstation equipped with advanced translation software. He immediately set up his equipment and began reviewing the negotiation files one final time. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. The holographic display showed Admiral Reese, his superior back on Earth. "Marcus, I know this assignment is challenging, but remember why we chose you. Your ability to see solutions others miss has impressed everyone at the Corps. Don't let their size and intimidation affect your judgment." "Understood, Admiral. I won't let Earth down." "I know you won't. Also, be aware that our intelligence suggests there may be more to this conflict than what's been officially disclosed. Keep your eyes open for any unusual patterns or behaviors." After the call ended, Marcus spent several hours studying detailed reports about each faction. The Corvanians were a warrior culture that respected strength and direct confrontation. The Thackeray were master negotiators who valued cunning and careful planning. The Zephyrians communicated through complex harmonic patterns and approached problems from highly analytical perspectives. What troubled Marcus was how perfectly balanced the conflict seemed. Each species had valid claims to various systems within the nebula, and their military capabilities were remarkably evenly matched. It was almost as if someone had carefully orchestrated the situation to create maximum tension without allowing any single faction to gain a decisive advantage. The next morning, Marcus made his way to the central conference chamber. The massive circular room was designed to accommodate beings of all sizes, with adjustable seating and environmental controls for each delegation. As he entered, conversations died down as the various aliens took note of Earth's lone representative. "Where is the rest of your delegation?" asked Supreme Negotiator Kaisera of the Thrakkery, her silver eyes fixed on Marcus with curiosity rather than contempt. Surely Earth didn't send only one representative for negotiations of this magnitude. "Earth believes in quality over quantity," Marcus replied smoothly. "I'm here to listen, learn, and hopefully help find a solution that benefits everyone." Commander Vexthul snorted with amusement. One tiny human against the combined diplomatic might of 3 galactic powers. This should be entertaining. The first day of negotiations proceeded exactly as Marcus had expected. Each faction presented their historical claims and territorial demands with impressive displays of evidence and legal precedent. The Corvanians emphasized their ancient migration routes through the nebula. The Thrakkery highlighted their extensive survey and mapping efforts. The Zephyrians demonstrated their scientific research stations that had operated in the region for centuries. Marcus took careful notes, but said little during the formal presentations. He noticed that while each species passionately defended their own claims, they showed remarkable knowledge of their rivals' arguments. It was as if they had been preparing to counter each other's specific points for years. During the lunch break, Marcus found himself eating alone at a small table in the station's multi-species dining area. The food synthesizers could create meals suited to any known biology, and he had chosen a simple protein and vegetable combination that reminded him of home. "Mind if I join you?" The voice belonged to Dr. Zura Okafor, a human xenoarchaeologist who worked for the station's research division. Marcus looked up in surprise, not expecting to encounter another human so far from Earth's usual diplomatic routes. "Please sit," Marcus said, grateful for some familiar company. "I didn't realize there were other humans stationed here. I've been here for 6 months, studying artifacts recovered from the nebula region," Zara explained, settling into the adjustable chair. "I've been watching the negotiations with interest. How are things going?" "Complicated. Each faction has legitimate claims, but there's something about the whole situation that feels orchestrated. The evidence is almost too perfectly balanced." Zara leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You might be onto something. Some of the artifacts we've recovered don't match what any of the 3 species claim about their historical presence in the region. There are structures and technologies that predate all of their civilizations." Before Marcus could respond, a commotion erupted near the dining area's entrance. A group of Corvanian junior officers had cornered a small maintenance worker, a member of the Piptar species, barely 3 feet tall, with large, nervous eyes. "You scratch my armor, you clumsy little rodent," snarled one of the Corvanians. "Do you know what we do to creatures that damage military equipment?" The Piptar worker trembled, speaking in rapid, high-pitched tones that the station's translator struggled to process. "Accident. Very sorry. Please no hurt." Marcus stood without thinking, his chair scraping against the floor. "Excuse me," he called out, walking toward the confrontation. The dining area fell silent as other beings stopped their conversations to watch. "This doesn't concern you, tiny human," the lead Corvanian officer growled. "Return to your table before you get hurt." "Actually, it does concern me," Marcus replied calmly. "As a diplomatic representative, I have a responsibility to ensure that all beings on this station are treated fairly during these negotiations." The Corvanian officer laughed harshly. You're going to protect this little pest from us? Look at yourself, human. You're barely larger than the creature you're trying to defend." Marcus stepped between the Corvanians and the terrified maintenance worker. "Size isn't everything, officer. Sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest consequences." "Is that a threat?" The Corvanian's hand moved to his side weapon. "It's an observation," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the tension. "I'm simply suggesting that harming a non-combatant maintenance worker over a minor accident might reflect poorly on the Corvanian Empire during these sensitive negotiations." The dining area remained frozen in silence. Other Corvanian officers began to gather, as did representatives from the other factions. Marcus could feel dozens of eyes watching the confrontation unfold. "Stand aside, human," the officer demanded. "This is your last warning." Marcus didn't move. "I'm afraid I can't do that." What happened next surprised everyone in the room. The small Piptar maintenance worker suddenly straightened, his terrified demeanor vanishing completely. When he spoke, his voice was clear and confident, with none of the trembling fear from moments before. "That won't be necessary," the Piptar said, his large eyes now showing sharp intelligence rather than fear. "I believe this misunderstanding can be resolved peacefully." But it was the reaction of the Corvanian officers that truly stunned the watching crowd. As soon as the Piptar spoke in his new voice, every single Corvanian in the room immediately stepped back and dropped to one knee in a gesture of profound respect. "Honored Hunter," the lead officer whispered, his voice filled with awe and terror. We did not recognize you." The small Piptar creature looked at Marcus with what might have been approval. "This human shows courage worthy of respect. Perhaps Earth's representative is more formidable than appearances suggest." Marcus stared in confusion as the massive Corvanian warriors remained kneeling before the tiny maintenance worker. Nothing in his extensive briefings had prepared him for this bizarre turn of events. "I don't understand," Marcus said quietly. "What's happening here?" The Piptar smiled, revealing small but remarkably sharp teeth. "My apologies for the deception, Marcus Chun of Earth. Allow me to introduce myself properly. I am Kethvar, Shadow Hunter of the Apex Collective." A collective gasp echoed through the dining area. Even the Thackeray and Zephyrian delegates had risen from their tables, their faces showing mixtures of shock and fear. "Apex Collective?" Marcus repeated, the name triggering fragments of classified intelligence reports he'd studied years ago. "But that's impossible. The Apex Collective is a myth, a legend used to frighten young species." "We prefer to remain mythical," Kethvar said with amusement. "It makes our work significantly easier when most beings don't believe we exist." Commander Vexthal, still kneeling, spoke without raising his head. "Honored Hunter, if we had known you were observing the negotiations, you would have behaved differently," Kethvar finished. "Which is exactly why I didn't announce my presence. I wanted to see how each faction conducted themselves when they thought no one of consequence was watching." Marcus felt his world shifting as he began to understand the implications. "You've been testing us. All of us. The entire conflict over the nebula is some kind of evaluation." "Very good," Kethvar said approvingly. "Earth's reputation for quick thinking appears to be well-deserved." The small being gestured to the kneeling Corvanians, who immediately rose and stepped back. The Corvanian Empire, the Thackeray Confederation, and the Zephyrian Collective have all petitioned the Apex Collective for access to the advanced technologies contained within the Veil Nebula. We needed to assess which species, if any, had developed sufficiently to handle such power responsibly. "And the humans?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Earth was not initially part of the evaluation," Kethvar admitted. "Your species was considered too young and inexperienced. However, your unexpected diplomatic success in the Centauri crisis caught our attention. We decided to include you as a control variable, a neutral party whose actions might reveal the true nature of the other participants." Marcus looked around the dining area, noting how every alien present was watching their conversation with intense focus. "So what happens now?" "Now," Kethvar said, his small form somehow commanding the attention of beings many times his size, "the real test begins. Each species will have the opportunity to demonstrate their worthiness through action rather than words." "What kind of test?" Kethvar's sharp teeth showed in what might have been a smile. "The kind that reveals what a species truly values when everything they claim to believe is challenged." As if on cue, emergency alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lighting bathed the dining area in red as automated announcements declared a critical system failure in the life support sectors. "How convenient," Marcus muttered, suspicion growing in his mind. "Indeed," Kethvar agreed. "I wonder which species will prioritize their own safety, which will focus on protecting their negotiating positions, and which," he looked directly at Marcus, "will think first of others who cannot protect themselves." The chaos that followed would test every assumption Marcus had made about strength, courage, and what it truly meant to be a predator among the stars. But for the first time since arriving at the station, he felt like he finally understood the game being played, even if he wasn't sure he could win it. The emergency alarms continued their harsh wailing as beings throughout the dining area began to panic. Marcus watched in fascination as the crisis revealed the true nature of each species' priorities. The Thackeray delegation immediately huddled together, their silver eyes darting around as they calculated escape routes and tactical advantages. Supreme Negotiator Kai Sara began issuing rapid orders in their native language, clearly organizing a coordinated withdrawal to their secure quarters. The Corvanian warriors reacted with military precision, forming protective formations around their senior officers. Commander Vexthal barked commands, and within seconds they had established a defensive perimeter. However, Marcus noticed they made no move to help the smaller, weaker beings who were struggling in the chaos. The Zephyrian delegates responded by harmonizing in complex musical patterns, their crystalline bodies resonating with mathematical precision. Their collective consciousness was clearly analyzing the situation and formulating optimal responses for their own survival. Marcus looked around the dining area and saw exactly what Kethvar had predicted. The elderly Altarian couple near the window were struggling to move quickly enough to reach the exits. A group of young vegan exchange students were trapped behind an overturned table. The station's service workers, mostly small species like the Piptar, were being trampled by the larger beings rushing toward the emergency corridors. Interesting, Kethvar observed quietly, his large eyes watching Marcus rather than the chaos around them. Each species responds exactly according to their nature. The question is, what will Earth's representative choose to do? Marcus didn't hesitate. He rushed toward the elderly Altarians, their blue-tinged skin pale with fear as they struggled with their mobility aids. "Here, let me help," he said, offering his shoulder for support. "But you're so small," the elderly female protested. "We'll slow you down. Then, we'll be slow together," Marcus replied, helping guide them toward the nearest emergency exit. Behind him, he heard Kethvar's voice carrying clearly over the alarms. "Commander Vexthal, surely the mighty Corvanian Empire wouldn't abandon helpless civilians in a crisis?" The massive reptilian warrior turned, his scales darkening with what Marcus was learning to recognize as embarrassment. After a moment's hesitation, he gestured to his troops. "Corvanian forces, assist in evacuation procedures. Protect the weak." Dr. Zura Okafor appeared at Marcus's side, helping support the elderly Altarian male. "Smart move," she whispered. "You've just forced the Corvanians to choose between appearing cowardly and helping others." "That wasn't manipulation," Marcus said, breathing hard as they made their way down the corridor. "It was just the right thing to do." "Which is exactly why it worked," Zara replied with a smile. As they moved through the station's corridors, Marcus could see the emergency was very real. Atmospheric processors were failing in several sectors, and the backup systems weren't keeping pace. Smaller beings who required specific environmental conditions were already showing signs of distress. The evacuation route led to the station's central hub, where emergency shelters had been automatically deployed. The massive space could accommodate thousands of beings, with adjustable environmental controls for different species needs. But as they arrived, Marcus could see the system was overwhelmed. The environmental processors can't handle this many different atmospheric requirements simultaneously, announced Station Administrator Vortek, a multi-armed Centaurian whose stress was evident in his rapidly changing skin colors. "We need to prioritize by species population and biological necessity." Marcus felt his stomach sink as he realized what that meant. The smaller species, the ones with unique environmental needs, would be deprioritized in favor of the larger populations that could survive in more standard conditions. Supreme Negotiator Kai Sara stepped forward, her four arms gesturing elegantly. "The Thrakkery Confederation suggests prioritizing beings based on their diplomatic importance and strategic value to the galactic community." Commander Vexthal's growl echoed through the shelter. "The Corvanian Empire believes survival should be determined by strength and military capability. The strongest survivors will rebuild what is lost." The Zephyrian collective harmonized briefly before their speaker crystallized into speech. "Logical optimization requires preserving the greatest number of lives with available resources. Mathematical analysis suggests focusing on species with highest survival probability." Marcus listened to each proposal with growing anger. Every single suggestion involved sacrificing the weakest and most vulnerable beings in favor of those with political, military, or numerical advantages. The elderly, the young, the small, all would be abandoned to save those deemed more valuable. "There's another option," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the debate. The shelter fell silent as hundreds of beings turned to look at the tiny human who had dared to speak. "And what would that be, young human?" asked Administrator Vortek, his tone skeptical but not dismissive. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing his next words would either save lives or destroy Earth's diplomatic standing forever. We modify the shelter's life support to create overlapping environmental zones instead of trying to maintain separate ones for each species. Most beings can survive in slightly suboptimal conditions for a few hours. We adjust everyone's environment to a compromise setting that keeps everyone alive rather than keeping some comfortable while others die. The silence stretched for several heartbeats before Supreme Negotiator Kaisera laughed, a sound like silver bells. Impossible. The environmental systems aren't designed for such modifications. The risk of total system failure would be enormous. Actually, said a new voice from the crowd, it's theoretically possible. A figure emerged from the mass of evacuees, a being Marcus didn't recognize. Tall and angular, with pale gray skin and enormous dark eyes that seemed to see everything at once. The creature moved with predatory grace that reminded Marcus of the large cats he'd studied in his xenobiology courses. "Who are you?" Commander Vexthal demanded, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. The newcomer's laugh was soft but somehow terrifying. "I am Silthek of the Umbral Syndicate, and I am very interested in this human's proposal." Marcus felt Kethvar move closer to his side. The small Piptar's demeanor had shifted again, becoming tense and alert. "Silthek," he said quietly, "this complicates matters considerably." "The Umbral Syndicate," Zara whispered to Marcus. "They're apex predators. Real ones. They've conquered dozens of systems through superior tactical thinking and ruthless efficiency." Silthek approached Marcus with fluid movements that suggested deadly capability despite his elegant appearance. "Tell me, small human, why would you risk everyone's life to save the weak? In nature, the strong survive and the weak perish. This is the fundamental law of existence." Marcus met the alien's unsettling gaze without flinching. Because the strength of a civilization isn't measured by how well the strong survive, but by how well they protect those who can't protect themselves. "Fascinating philosophy," Silthek said, circling Marcus like a predator studying prey. "But philosophy doesn't overcome physics. Even if your environmental compromise is possible, implementing it would require someone to manually reconfigure the life support systems. The radiation levels in the damaged sections would be fatal to most species within minutes." "Then, we find a way to do it remotely," Marcus replied. "The control systems are hardwired for security reasons," Administrator Vortek explained. "Remote access to life support was disabled after the quantum virus incident 3 years ago. Manual reconfiguration requires physical presence in the engineering section. Silthekis predatoris milevident. So we return to natural selection. Who among you has the strength and endurance to survive lethal radiation long enough to save the others?" Marcus felt every eye in the shelter focus on him. The implication was clear. He was the one proposing the solution, but he was also obviously the least physically capable of implementing it. His small human frame couldn't possibly survive conditions that would challenge beings many times his size. "I'll do it," Marcus said simply. The declaration sparked immediate protests from multiple directions. "Impossible," "suicide," "foolish," echoed through the shelter in dozens of languages. Commander Vexthal's voice boomed over the others. "Human, I respect your courage, but you would die before completing 10% of the necessary modifications." "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "But if I don't try, people die for certain. If I do try, maybe everyone lives." "Your mathematics are flawed," the Zephyrian collective chimed. "Probability of success approaches 0. Sacrifice of one life to achieve 0 probability outcome is illogical." Marcus looked around the shelter, seeing the faces of hundreds of beings, young and old, strong and weak from dozens of different worlds. "Logic isn't the only way to solve problems." Silthek laughed again, the sound sending chills through several nearby beings. "You would throw away your life on an impossible gesture? How utterly human." "Actually," came a new voice, "he won't be going alone." Everyone turned to see who had spoken. Commander Vexthal stepped forward, his massive form casting long shadows under the emergency lighting. "If the tiny human has the courage to attempt this, then the Corvanian Empire will not be shown up by a being a fraction of our size." Supreme Negotiator Kaisera's 4 eyes widened in surprise. "Commander," Surely you don't intend to participate in this suicidal venture. I intend to ensure it succeeds, Vexthal replied firmly. Corvanian honor demands no less. To Marcus's amazement, other voices began joining in. A young Thracery engineer volunteered her technical expertise. Several Zephyrian drones offered their radiation-resistant crystalline structures for the most dangerous tasks. Even some of the smaller species found ways they could contribute to the effort. Within minutes, what had started as Marcus's lone desperate plan had become a massive coordinated effort involving beings from every major faction in the shelter. Silfek watched the organization with fascination. Remarkable. The human's willingness to sacrifice himself has inspired others to risk their own lives. This is not typical predator behavior. No, Kethvar said quietly, his small voice somehow carrying to every corner of the shelter. It's something much rarer. It's leadership. The engineering team that formed included beings with complementary skills and capabilities. The Corvanians provided strength and endurance. The Thracery offered technical knowledge and precision. The Zephyrians contributed analytical processing and radiation resistance. Even the smaller species found crucial roles, their size allowing them to access maintenance areas that larger beings couldn't reach. As they prepared to enter the damaged sections of the station, Marcus found himself at the center of something he'd never expected. Beings who had dismissed him as weak and insignificant were now looking to him for guidance and inspiration. This is unprecedented, Dr. Okafor observed, helping Marcus calibrate his emergency environmental suit. I've never seen such cooperation between species that were in conflict hours ago. Maybe they were never really in conflict, Marcus replied, checking his equipment one final time. Maybe they were just waiting for someone to give them a reason to work together. Silfek appeared beside them, his predatory grace undiminished by his own protective gear. I will be accompanying your team, small human. Why? Marcus asked suspiciously. The umbral predator's dark eyes gleamed with something that might have been respect. Because I am curious to see what happens when prey chooses to protect rather than flee. It challenges everything my species believes about the nature of strength. As the hastily assembled team prepared to enter the station's damaged sections, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were participating in something much larger than a simple rescue mission. The way Kethvar watched them with approval, the unexpected cooperation between former enemies, the strange timing of the crisis itself, everything suggested that this was exactly what the mysterious Apex Collective had hoped to see. The question was whether Marcus and his unlikely allies could succeed in their impossible task, or whether their courage would only result in a more spectacular failure. Either way, Marcus realized the tiny human from Earth was about to find out what it truly meant to be tested by the galaxy's greatest predators. The damaged engineering section of Kepler Station was a maze of twisted metal, sparking conduits, and lethal radiation. Marcus's environmental suit beeped continuously, warning him that exposure levels were already approaching dangerous thresholds. Behind him, the unlikely rescue team moved through the wreckage with determined purpose. Radiation levels increasing, announced Zephyr, one of the Zephyrian drones whose crystalline structure could withstand significantly more exposure than organic beings. Current rate suggests biological entities have approximately 47 minutes before permanent damage occurs. Commander Vexthal's heavy breathing echoed through the comm system as his massive frame squeezed through a partially collapsed doorway. Human, are you certain this path leads to the primary environmental controls? Marcus consulted the schematic display on his suit's heads-up system. According to the station blueprints, the main control nexus should be through this section and down 2 levels. But the radiation is getting worse the deeper we go. Then we move faster, declared Kiranel, the Thracery engineer whose 4 arms made her invaluable for operating multiple control systems simultaneously. Standing here, debating, will only waste the time we don't have. Silfek moved through the wreckage with predatory grace, his umbral physiology allowing him to navigate the damaged sections more easily than the others. The human is correct about the radiation increase, he observed, his voice eerily calm. At current exposure rates, most of you will begin experiencing cellular damage within 30 minutes. Most of us, Marcus asked, noting the specific phrasing. The umbral predator's dark eyes gleamed in the emergency lighting. Umbral physiology includes significant radiation resistance. I could survive these conditions for several hours if necessary. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the failing life support systems. You could complete this mission alone, couldn't you? Possibly, Silthek admitted. But I find myself curious to see if your species' unusual approach to problem-solving will succeed. You're using us as test subjects, Marcus realized. We're all test subjects. Kethvar's voice came through the communication system from the shelter. The question is what each species will reveal about themselves under extreme pressure. As they descended deeper into the station's infrastructure, the damage became increasingly severe. Entire sections had been twisted by some kind of massive force, and the radiation signatures were unlike anything in Marcus's database. The pattern suggested this wasn't accidental damage. Something had deliberately torn through the station's defenses. Commander Vexthal, Marcus said, studying his scanner readings, what do you know about weapons that could cause this kind of damage pattern? The Corvanian warrior's response was grimly professional. These energy signatures. I've seen similar patterns before. This is Void Reaper technology. The entire team froze. Even Silthek's predatory composure showed a crack of concern. Impossible, Kiranel whispered. The Void Reapers were destroyed in the Extinction Wars. No one has seen their technology for over 1,000 years. Apparently someone has, Marcus said quietly. Which means this crisis isn't an accident at all. Zephyr's harmonic voice carried undertones of mathematical precision and growing alarm. Analysis indicates weapon discharge occurred approximately 6 hours ago, deliberately targeting life support infrastructure. This suggests coordinated attack rather than system failure. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. We're not dealing with an emergency. We're dealing with an act of war. But against whom? Bexthal demanded. The station is neutral territory. No faction would dare attack it directly. Unless, Silthek said thoughtfully, someone wanted to create exactly this situation. A crisis that would force different species to work together or watch each other die. Marcus felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place in his mind. Kethvar, are you monitoring this conversation? I am, came the small being's reply. Is the Apex Collective responsible for this attack? The pause before Kethvar's response spoke volumes. The situation is more complex than you realize, Marcus Chun. That's not an answer, because a complete answer would compromise the evaluation process. What I can tell you is that the Void Reaper technology was not deployed by the Apex Collective. Marcus exchanged glances with his teammates, seeing his own growing suspicion reflected in their expressions. But you knew it was going to happen. We suspected someone might attempt to disrupt the negotiations. We did not anticipate they would possess such dangerous technology. Silthek's predatory laugh echoed through the damaged corridor. Fascinating. Even the legendary Apex Collective can be surprised. This suggests your mysterious attackers represent a threat significant enough to concern beings who evaluate entire civilizations. Which is precisely why this test has become more important than originally intended, Kethvar replied. The galaxy may soon face a threat that requires unprecedented cooperation between species. We need to know which civilizations can work together when survival is at stake. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about saving the beings in the shelter anymore. It was about proving that different species could unite against a common enemy. Then, let's get to work, he said, pushing forward through the wreckage. The main environmental control center was a disaster. Massive energy discharges had fused critical components together, and radiation levels were approaching lethal concentrations even for their protected team. Worse, the modifications required to create Marcus's compromised life support configuration would require precise manipulation of dozens of interconnected systems. This is impossible, Kiranel declared after studying the damage. Half the control matrices are completely destroyed. Even with my technical expertise and your combined physical capabilities, we cannot repair enough systems to implement the environmental modifications. Then, we don't repair them, Marcus said, his mind racing through alternatives. We bypass them. Commander Vexthal's skeptical grunt echoed through the comm system. Explain. Marcus pointed to a series of emergency conduits that ran parallel to the main life support systems. These are designed to provide backup power in case of primary system failure. If we can reroute environmental controls through the emergency network, we might be able to create the overlapping atmospheric zones without using the damaged primary systems. Zephyr's crystalline form resonated with analytical harmonics. Theoretical possibility exists, but implementation would require simultaneous coordination of 17 different subsystems across 6 station levels. Margin for error approaches zero. Also, Silthek added with predatory precision, the emergency conduits are not designed to handle full environmental loads. Overloading them could cause catastrophic system failure, killing everyone instantly rather than slowly. Marcus looked around at his unlikely team. The massive Corvanian warrior whose strength could force open damaged access panels. The four-armed Thackeray engineer whose technical skills surpassed anything Marcus had studied. The crystalline Zephyrian whose analytical processing could calculate the precise timing required. Even the umbral predator whose radiation resistance would allow him to work in areas too dangerous for the others. It's not about the risk, Marcus realized aloud. It's about trust. What do you mean? Vexthal asked. Look at us. 6 hours ago, your species were ready to go to war with each other over territorial disputes. Now you're all willing to risk your lives based on a plan proposed by someone you considered insignificant. That level of cooperation, that willingness to trust each other completely, that's what whoever attacked the station didn't expect. Silthek's dark eyes gleamed with something that might have been admiration. You believe the attack was designed to cause panic and conflict, to make each species prioritize their own survival over cooperation. Exactly. But instead of dividing us, the crisis brought us together. We're not just saving lives, we're proving that different species can function as a unified team. Kirinel's forearms gestured with growing excitement. If we can coordinate perfectly, the emergency bypass might work. But it would require each of us to execute our parts of the plan with absolute precision, trusting that the others will do the same. No room for species-specific priorities or cultural biases, HFY added. Success requires complete commitment to collective goal. Commander Vexthal's laugh rumbled through the damaged chamber. The tiny human wants warriors, engineers, analysts, and predators to work together as a single organism. Impossible. Impossible, Marcus agreed. Unless we stop thinking of ourselves as different species and start thinking of ourselves as one team. What followed was the most complex cooperative effort Marcus had ever witnessed. Commander Vexthal used his incredible strength to access damage control panels that would have taken hours to reach through normal maintenance procedures. Kirinel's technical expertise and multiple limbs allowed her to manipulate dozens of controls simultaneously while Marcus coordinated the overall sequence. HFY processed thousands of variables in real time, adjusting the plan as conditions changed. Silthek worked in the most radiation-saturated areas, his predatory instincts allowing him to navigate dangers that would have killed the others. But what impressed Marcus most was how naturally they began anticipating each other's needs and capabilities. Vexthal would clear a path just before Kirinel needed access to a control panel. HFY would calculate timing adjustments seconds before Marcus realized they were necessary. Silthek would secure dangerous areas just as other team members needed to enter them. Remarkable. Kethvar's voice came through the comm system as they worked. You're demonstrating pack behavior typically seen only in species that evolve together. Maybe, Marcus replied, carefully calibrating a pressure regulator. The ability to form packs isn't limited by evolution. Maybe it just requires the right circumstances. And the right leadership, Silthek added, his voice carrying a note of respect that Marcus had never heard from an Umbral before. As they neared completion of the environmental bypass, emergency alerts began sounding throughout the station. But these weren't the familiar warnings of system failure. These were proximity alarms indicating approaching ships. Multiple vessels detected. Came Administrator Vortex panicked announcement. Configuration unknown. They're not responding to communication attempts. Through the comm system, Marcus could hear the sounds of renewed panic from the shelter. The beings they were trying to save were now facing a new threat, and the rescue team was trapped deep in the station's damaged infrastructure. We need to finish this, Marcus declared, his hands moving frantically over the control systems. Everyone in position for final synchronization. Incoming ships are powering weapons, Kethvar reported, his small voice somehow carrying over all the chaos. They appear to be using the same Void Reaper technology that damaged the station. Marcus felt his blood freeze. If the attackers had returned to finish what they started, then everyone in the shelter would die regardless of whether the life support modification succeeded. Time to completion? Silthek demanded. For minutes, Kirinel replied. Maybe 3 if everything goes perfectly. We don't have 3 minutes, Vexthal growled. Those ships will be in weapons range in less than 2. Marcus looked around at his team, beings who had gone from enemies to allies to something approaching family in the space of a few hours. Each of them was looking to him for a decision that could save hundreds of lives or doom them all. Then, we do something impossible, Marcus said quietly. We finish in 90 seconds. The final phase of their desperate plan would test not just their technical abilities, but their willingness to trust each other completely in the face of certain death. As the unknown ships approached with weapons charged, Marcus and his unlikely allies prepared to attempt something that every rational analysis said could not be done. But then, again, Marcus was beginning to realize rationality might not be humanity's greatest strength after all. 90 seconds. Marcus's hands moved across the control panels with desperate precision while proximity alarms screamed through the station's damaged corridors. The unknown ships were closing fast, their Void Reaper weapons charging energy signatures that made his radiation detector spike into dangerous levels even from this distance. Synchronized sequence initiating, HFY announced, her crystalline form resonating with mathematical harmonies that somehow kept perfect time. All teams execute on my mark in 5, 4, 3. Commander Vexthal's massive claws found purchase on the emergency power coupling, his incredible strength ready to force connections that were never designed to handle full environmental loads. Ready, tiny human. Kirinel's 4 arms hovered over 17 different control interfaces, her Thackeray precision allowing her to monitor systems that would overwhelm any other species. Engineering sequences prepared for implementation. Silthek's voice came from the most radiation-saturated section of the control room, where his umbral physiology allowed him to work in conditions that would have killed the others in minutes. Tertiary bypass systems active and stable. 2-1 execute. What happened next defied every safety protocol in galactic engineering. Emergency systems designed for temporary backups suddenly carried the full environmental load for thousands of beings. Power conduits overloaded and compensated through pure redundancy. Atmospheric processors that had never been intended to work together began creating overlapping zones of survivable environment throughout the station's shelters. For 30 seconds, everything worked perfectly. The life support readings showed stable atmospheric conditions throughout the shelter areas, proving that Marcus's impossible compromise could actually keep everyone alive. Then, the attacking ships opened fire. Void Reaper energy beams sliced through the station's outer hull like it was made of paper. The entire structure shuddered under impacts that sent Marcus and his team sprawling across the control room floor. Emergency lighting failed completely, leaving them in darkness broken only by the eerie glow of their suit displays. Shelter areas compromised. Kethvar's voice came through static-filled communications. Hull breach in sections 7 through 12. We're losing atmosphere. Marcus pulled himself to his feet, feeling blood from a head wound trickling down his face inside his helmet. Around him, his teammates were struggling to reach their control stations as the station continued to shake under weapons fire. The environmental modifications are still holding, HFY reported, her harmonic voice somehow maintaining perfect clarity despite the chaos. But hull breaches are creating pressure differentials that will destabilize the entire system within minutes. Can we compensate? Marcus shouted over the sound of groaning metal and sparking electronics. Not possible, Silthek replied, his predatory calm unshaken even by their desperate situation. The attacking ships are systematically targeting the exact systems we're using to maintain life support. They know precisely what we've done and how to counter it. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Someone on the station is feeding them information. Someone who's been observing our rescue efforts and reporting our progress to the attackers. Vexthal growled, his massive frame struggling to maintain position as another energy beam shook the station. Marcus's mind raced through the possibilities. Who among the diplomatic delegations would have access to detailed engineering information? Who could monitor their activities without detection? Who would benefit from the failure of interspecies cooperation? Kethvar, Marcus called through the comm system. Where exactly are you monitoring us from? The central observation deck, overlooking the shelter areas, came the reply. Why? Because someone needs direct line of sight to track our modifications and coordinate the attacks. Someone who's been watching everything we do. Another massive impact sent sparks cascading through the control room. This time, several critical systems failed completely, and Marcus could see their carefully calibrated environmental balance beginning to collapse. Life support failure imminent, Kiranel announced, her 4 arms working frantically to compensate for damaged systems. We have perhaps 3 minutes before atmospheric conditions become lethal throughout the shelter areas. Marcus looked around at his team, beings from different worlds who had risked everything to save lives they barely knew. The massive Corvanian warrior whose strength had made the impossible possible. The brilliant Thackeray engineer whose skills exceeded anything in Marcus's experience. The analytical Zephyrian whose processing power rivaled the station's main computers. The deadly umbral predator who had chosen cooperation over conquest. I need to get to the observation deck, Marcus said suddenly. Silthek's dark eyes gleamed in the emergency lighting. That would be suicide. The attacking ships are concentrating their fire on the central hub. You'd never survive the journey. Maybe not, Marcus agreed. But if someone up there is coordinating the attacks, then stopping them might give you time to complete the environmental repairs. One human against an unknown traitor and attacking warships. Vexthal's laugh rumbled through the comm system. Even for you, tiny human, that seems optimistic. Marcus was already moving toward the damaged exit, his small size allowing him to navigate through wreckage that would trap his larger companions. I'm not planning to fight them. I'm planning to outthink them. Marcus, Kiranel called after him. Even if you reach the observation deck, what can you possibly do against Void Reaper technology? I don't know yet, Marcus admitted, but I'll figure something out. As he climbed through the station's damaged infrastructure toward the central hub, Marcus could hear his teammates coordinating their desperate efforts to maintain life support. Their voices carried a mixture of determination and fear that drove him forward through corridors filled with sparking electronics and twisted metal. The journey to the observation deck took precious minutes they didn't have. Emergency bulkheads had sealed automatically when the attacks began, forcing Marcus to find alternative routes through maintenance shafts and service corridors. His small size, which had been a source of ridicule for so long, now became his greatest advantage as he squeezed through openings that would have trapped larger beings. When he finally reached the observation deck, what he found confirmed his worst suspicions. The deck overlooked the massive shelter area where hundreds of beings waited in terror as their life support systems failed around them. But Marcus's attention was fixed on the figure standing at the central control station, someone he recognized but had never suspected. Dr. Zura Okafor turned as he entered, her familiar human face showing no surprise at his arrival. Hello, Marcus. I was wondering when you'd figured out. Zura. Marcus felt betrayal hit him like a physical wound. You're the one coordinating the attacks. Coordinating is such a limited word, she replied, her hands moving across control interfaces with practiced efficiency. I prefer to think of myself as conducting a symphony of destruction. What? Marcus demanded, approaching slowly while his mind raced through possible strategies. Why betray your own species? My species? Zara laughed bitterly. Humans are weak, Marcus. We're small and fragile and completely outclassed by every other intelligent species in the galaxy. The only reason we've survived this long is because the real predators haven't noticed us yet. So you decided to help them notice us? I decided to join them, Zara corrected. The beings attacking the station aren't some random terrorist group. They're advanced scouts for the Harvester fleet, the descendants of the original Void Reaper civilization that was supposedly destroyed in the Extinction Wars. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. The Harvester fleet was a nightmare from galactic history, a civilization of pure predators that consumed entire worlds before moving on to their next target. If they had returned, they've been watching the galaxy for centuries, Zara continued, waiting for the right moment to resume their conquest. When they learned about the negotiations here, they saw an opportunity to eliminate several potential threats simultaneously while testing their improved Void Reaper technology. And you're helping them. I'm earning my place in their hierarchy, Zara said proudly. When they finish harvesting this galaxy, I'll be one of the few humans they allow to survive as servitors. Marcus looked down at the shelter area, where he could see beings from dozens of species huddled together as their environment slowly failed. Children, elderly, strong, weak, all facing death because one human had chosen betrayal over courage. The life support modifications you've implemented are quite ingenious, Zara observed, following his gaze, but ultimately pointless. The harvester ships will systematically destroy every system you manage to repair until everyone dies slowly and painfully. Unless I stop you. Zara's laugh was genuinely amused. You? Marcus, you're barely 5 feet tall and way less than most children. I've been enhanced with harvester biotechnology. My reflexes are 3 times faster than baseline human. My strength is increased by a factor of 4, and my neural processing has been optimized for tactical analysis. You can't possibly threaten me. You're right, Marcus agreed. I can't fight you. Then, why are you here? Marcus smiled, the expression feeling strange on his face given their desperate circumstances. Because fighting isn't the only way to win. Before Zara could react, Marcus lunged not toward her, but toward the central control station. His small hands found the emergency communication system and activated a station-wide broadcast before she could stop him. "Attention, all ships," Marcus said quickly, his voice echoing through the station's corridors and broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. "This is Marcus Chun of Earth's Diplomatic Corps. The attacks on this station are being coordinated by Dr. Zara Okafor, a human agent working with Harvester Fleet Advanced Scouts. She's currently located on the central observation deck and is using our own station systems to guide their weapons targeting." Zara's enhanced reflexes allowed her to reach Marcus in seconds, but the damage was already done. Her position was now known to every being on the station, and more importantly, to the hidden Apex collective monitoring systems. Clever, she admitted, her enhanced strength pinning Marcus against the control station. But ultimately futile. The harvester ships will simply destroy the entire observation deck to eliminate any potential interference. Will they? Marcus asked, blood running from his nose where her grip had injured him. "Because I'm betting they need you alive to continue coordinating their attacks. Without your inside knowledge of the station systems, they'll have to resort to brute force bombardment, which risks destroying the advanced technology they're hoping to capture." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Zara's enhanced features. "You see," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger despite his injuries, "I've been wondering why they didn't just destroy the station outright. Void Reaper technology is certainly capable of it. But they want something here, don't they? Some piece of advanced Apex collective technology that can only be captured intact." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the observation deck. Heavy, measured steps that Marcus recognized immediately. The Harvester Fleet seeks the Apex Collective's dimensional gateway technology. Commander Vexthel's voice rumbled from the entrance. Technology that requires specific environmental conditions to remain stable. Zara spun to face the massive Corvanian warrior, her enhanced reflexes putting her in a defensive crouch. "Impossible. You were trapped in the engineering sections. We completed the life support repairs," Kiranel announced, her 4 arms visible as she flanked Vexthel from the left side of the entrance. "Turns out the environmental modifications work much more efficiently when the targeting information stops being transmitted to the attacking ships. Mathematical analysis indicated probable location of information source." Zephyr's harmonic voice added from the right side. "Convergence on observation deck was logical conclusion." Silthek's predatory form seemed to materialize from the shadows near the back of the deck. The Umbral Syndicate has encountered Harvester Scouts before. Their enhancement technology produces distinctive behavioral patterns. Marcus felt Zara's grip tighten as she realized she was surrounded. But instead of panic, her expression showed calculation, the cold analysis of enhanced neural processing weighing her options. "You cannot stop the Harvester Fleet," she said calmly. "This station contains dozens of different species representing the galaxy's finest diplomatic and scientific minds. When the fleet harvests their knowledge and capabilities, nothing will be able to stand against them. That assumes they successfully capture the station," came a new voice from the entrance. Everyone turned to see Kethvar enter, his small Piptar form seeming insignificant compared to the larger beings around him. But Marcus noticed that even Silthek stepped back respectfully as the tiny shadow hunter approached. "The Apex Collective has been monitoring Harvester Fleet movements for some time," Kethvar continued, his large eyes fixed on Zara with predatory intensity that seemed impossible from such a small creature. "We suspected they had developed human assets, but We needed confirmation before taking action. Action, Zara demanded. The dimensional gateway technology you seek to capture does indeed exist on this station, Kethvar replied. However, you have fundamentally misunderstood its purpose. The small being gestured, and the observation deck's displays suddenly showed images of space around the station. Marcus gasped as he saw what the screens revealed. Dozens of massive ships materializing for what appeared to be empty space. Their designs unlike anything he had ever seen. The gateway isn't stored on this station, Kethvar explained. The entire station is a gateway. And your attack has just provided us with the exact coordinates of the Harvester fleet's staging area. Marcus watched in fascination and terror as the newly arrived ships, clearly Apex collective vessels, moved with impossible speed and precision toward the attacking Harvester scouts. The enemy's Void Reaper technology, which had seemed so devastating against the station's defenses, appeared almost primitive compared to the weapons that began firing from the collective ships. You've been manipulated, Marcus realized aloud, looking at Zara's increasingly pale face. The entire situation, the negotiations, the crisis, even your betrayal, it was all designed to draw out the Harvester scouts and locate their fleet. The test was never about which species could cooperate in a crisis, Kethvar confirmed. It was about whether the galaxy's younger races could be trusted with knowledge of the galaxy's true threats. Your actions today have proven that some species, humans among them, can choose sacrifice over survival, cooperation over competition, and courage over fear. As the Apex collective ships engaged the Harvester scouts in a battle that lasted only minutes, Marcus finally understood the scope of what they had stumbled into. The tiny human who had been ridiculed and dismissed had become part of something much larger than diplomatic negotiations or territorial disputes. They had helped save not just the beings on a single station, but potentially every free species in the galaxy. The silence that followed the destruction of the Harvester scout ships was profound. Through the observation deck's massive viewports, Marcus watched debris from the enemy vessels drift past like metallic snow. The Apex collective ships hung motionless in space, their alien designs beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Dr. Zura Okafor remained frozen in her defensive crouch, her enhanced reflexes useless against the reality that her Harvester allies had been obliterated in minutes. The biotechnology that had made her feel superior to baseline humans now seemed like a child's toy compared to the forces she had witnessed. The immediate threat has been neutralized, Kethvar announced, his small voice carrying clearly through the observation deck. However, the larger situation remains complex. Commander Vexthal's massive form relaxed slightly, though Marcus noticed the Corvanian warrior kept his weapons ready. What are the Harvester fleet's main forces? These were only scouts. The Dimensional Gateway has provided us with their staging coordinates, Kethvar replied. Apex collective forces are moving to engage them now. However, the outcome of that confrontation will determine the future of this entire galactic region. Silthek moved with predatory grace to where Zara remained crouched, his dark eyes studying her with clinical interest. The enhanced human represents a significant intelligence asset. Her neural modifications contain detailed information about Harvester tactics and capabilities. She betrayed every being on this station, Kiranel declared, her four arms gesturing with controlled fury. Thackeray justice demands she face consequences for her actions. As does Corvanian honor, Vexthal growled. Marcus looked at Zara, someone he had considered a friend just hours earlier. Her familiar human features were distorted by the fear and desperation of someone who had gambled everything and lost. The biotechnological enhancements that had made her feel powerful now made her appear somehow less human. What happens to her is less important than what happens next, Marcus said quietly. We've proven that different species can work together in a crisis. But can we maintain that cooperation when the crisis is over? Zephyr's crystalline form resonated with analytical harmonics. Statistical analysis indicates high probability of reverting to previous conflict patterns once immediate threat is removed. Historical precedent suggests temporary alliances dissolve rapidly without external pressure. The tiny human raises an important point, Kethvar observed. The test you have undergone was designed to evaluate more than crisis response. It was meant to determine whether your species possessed the maturity necessary for membership in the greater galactic community. Greater galactic community? Marcus repeated, The small shadow hunter gestured toward the alien ships visible through the viewport. The Apex Collective represents only one faction among many that exist beyond the borders of what you consider known space. The conflicts between the Corvanian Empire, Thackeray Confederation, and Zephyrian Collective, indeed, the entire political structure of this galactic region, represents merely the youngest and most primitive civilizations in a vast cosmic ecosystem. Marcus felt his worldview expanding once again. You're saying there are entire civilizations we don't even know exist? Civilizations that have moved beyond territorial disputes and resource competition, HFY confirmed. Beings that have achieved levels of cooperation and understanding that make today's events seem like children playing in sandbox. Then, why involve us at all? Bexthal demanded. Why not simply impose peace through superior force? Because forced peace is not true peace, came a new voice from the observation deck entrance. Everyone turned to see a figure unlike any Marcus had encountered before. Tall and graceful, with features that seemed to shift subtly as he watched, as if the being existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that resonated in frequencies Marcus could feel in his bones. I am Talvarin of the Synthesis Council, the newcomer announced. I have observed your actions with great interest, Marcus Chon of Earth. Marcus felt every eye on the observation deck focus on him. My actions weren't special. Everyone here contributed equally to solving the crisis. Precisely, Talvarin replied, his shifting features forming what might have been a smile. Lesser beings would have claimed credit for the victory. Primitive minds would have used the crisis to establish dominance over their allies. But you continue to prioritize collective success over personal advancement. That's just basic common sense. No, Silthek interjected, his predatory instincts apparently triggered by something about the newcomer. It's highly unusual behavior for any species. Most beings, when placed in leadership positions during crises, develop territorial attitudes about their authority. Talvarin's shifting form seemed to nod approvingly. The Umbral Syndicate speaks accurately. Your species displays a remarkable capacity for what we term hierarchical flexibility, the ability to lead when leadership is needed and follow when others are better qualified, without allowing ego to interfere with optimal outcomes. Marcus looked around at his unlikely companions. These beings taught me as much as I taught them. Commander Vexthal's strength made our plan possible. Kiranel's technical expertise was essential for implementation. Zephyra's analytical capabilities kept us coordinated. Even Silthek's predatory instincts helped us navigate dangers we couldn't have survived alone. And yet, Talvarin observed, you were the catalyst that transformed potential enemies into functional allies. This suggests that humanity possesses a quality we have been seeking for some time, which is the ability to see potential rather than just existing reality. Most species observe other beings and catalog their limitations. Humans appear to observe other beings and imagine their possibilities. Ketvar moved closer to the group, his small form somehow commanding attention despite his size. The Synthesis Council has been evaluating younger species for inclusion in expanded galactic civilization. The process typically takes centuries and involves extensive cultural modification to prepare candidates for the responsibilities involved. What kind of responsibilities? Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer would be overwhelming. Talvarin's shifting features became more solid, as if he were focusing more of his attention on their immediate dimension. The Harvester fleet represents one of many threats that exist beyond the boundaries of your current understanding. Void predators that consume entire star systems. Quantum parasites that feed on consciousness itself. Temporal anarchists that seek to unravel causality throughout the universe. Marcus felt his mind struggling to process concepts that seemed beyond human comprehension. And you want us to help fight these things? We want you to help prevent them from becoming necessary to fight, Talvarin corrected. The greatest victories in cosmic civilization are achieved not through warfare, but through cooperation so effective that warfare becomes obsolete. Commander Vexthal's skeptical grunt echoed through the observation deck. Cooperation between species that have been in conflict for generations? That seems optimistic even by human standards. Perhaps, Marcus admitted. But a few hours ago, the idea of Corvanians and Thackeray working together seemed impossible too. Yet here we are. Here we are indeed, Kiranel agreed, her four arms gesturing with something that might have been wonder. I find myself viewing former enemies as potential allies. Statistical analysis supports preliminary conclusion. HFY chimed in harmonically. Cooperative outcomes exceeded competitive outcomes by significant margins across all measure parameters. Silthek's predatory laugh carried a note of genuine amusement. The humans have infected us with their irrational optimism. This could be considered a form of mental warfare, or a form of evolution, Talvarin suggested. Species that learn to transcend their instinctive limitations often discover capabilities they never knew they possessed. Marcus looked out at the Apex Collective ships, still visible through the viewport. What happens now? Do we all just go back to our previous conflicts and pretend this never happened? That choice, Kethvar said solemnly, belongs to each of your species. The Apex Collective and Synthesis Council can offer opportunities for expanded cooperation, but we cannot force anyone to accept them. What kind of opportunities? Vexthal asked. Joint exploration missions to investigate threats beyond known space, Talvarin explained. Collaborative research projects to develop technologies that benefit all species. Cultural exchange programs to build understanding between different forms of consciousness. And, eventually, for those who prove ready, membership in a galactic synthesis, a coalition of mature civilizations working together to nurture younger species and defend against cosmic-level threats. The magnitude of what was being offered hit Marcus like a physical blow. Not just for humanity, but for all the species represented on the station. The chance to become part of something larger than territorial disputes and resource competition. The opportunity to contribute to galactic civilization rather than merely survive in it. The tiny human seems overwhelmed, Silthek observed with predatory amusement. Perhaps the responsibilities are too great for such a small species. Marcus looked at the umbral predator and realized he was being tested again. But this time, the test wasn't about crisis management or technical problem solving. It was about whether humans could maintain their optimism and cooperation when offered something they had never imagined possible. Maybe we are too small, Marcus agreed. Maybe humans aren't ready for responsibilities on a galactic scale. But I'd rather try and fail than never try at all. And your companions? Talvarin asked, his attention focusing on each of the other beings in turn. Commander Vexthal's massive frame straightened into a formal military posture. The Corvanian Empire has never backed down from a worthy challenge. The Thrakkery Confederation values knowledge above territorial gain, Kiranel declared. If cooperation offers greater learning opportunities than conflict, we will adapt. Mathematical analysis indicates optimal outcomes through collaborative approaches, HFY harmonized. Zephyrian Collective will pursue logically superior strategies. The Umbral Syndicate. Silthek paused, his predatory features showing unusual uncertainty. We have always defined ourselves through conquest and dominance. Cooperation represents a fundamental challenge to our nature. Evolution often requires challenging one's fundamental nature, Talvarin observed gently. Silthek's dark eyes gleamed with something that might have been anticipation. Then, perhaps it is time for the Umbral to evolve. As if responding to some unspoken signal, the massive viewports of the observation deck began displaying new images. Star maps showing regions beyond anything Marcus had ever studied. Representations of alien civilizations whose technologies and cultures defied imagination. And, throughout it all, beings of hundreds of different species working together on projects that span star systems. This is what galactic civilization looks like when cooperation transcends competition, Talvarin explained. This is what becomes possible when different forms of consciousness learn to value each other's unique perspectives. Marcus felt tears on his cheeks as he watched the displays. The tiny human who had been ridiculed for his size and dismissed for his youth was being offered the chance to help build something magnificent beyond comprehension. There will be challenges, Kethvar warned. Species that resist cooperation. Threats that test every alliance. Failures that require rebuilding from complete collapse. But also discoveries that no single species could achieve alone, Talvarin added. Friendships that transcend biological differences. And the satisfaction of knowing that your actions contribute to something larger than yourself. Marcus looked around at the beings who had become his allies, former enemies who had risked everything to save strangers. The massive warrior whose strength had been essential to their success. The brilliant engineer whose skills had made impossible solutions possible. The analytical intelligence that had kept them coordinated through chaos. The deadly predator who had chosen cooperation over conquest. "When do we start?" Marcus asked. Talvarin's shifting features formed what was definitely a smile. "You already have." In the days that followed, as rescue ships arrived and diplomatic protocols resumed, Marcus learned that the events on Kepler Station had consequences far beyond what any of them had imagined. The cooperation they had demonstrated became a model for other interspecies negotiations. The environmental modifications Marcus had proposed were adopted as standard emergency procedures throughout the galactic diplomatic network. Most importantly, the alliance formed between former enemies became the foundation for the first multi-species exploration fleet in galactic history. Months later, as Marcus stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Unity, a ship designed and built through unprecedented cooperation between Corvanian, Thackeray, Zephyrian, Umbral, and human technologies, he reflected on how much had changed since that first day when he had been ridiculed for his size. The galaxy, it turned out, was vast beyond imagination and filled with wonders that no single species could discover alone. But perhaps most importantly, it was also filled with beings who, given the right circumstances, could choose cooperation over competition, courage over fear, and hope over despair. The tiny human had found his place among the stars, not through strength or size, but through the simple recognition that every being, no matter how different, had something valuable to contribute to the greater whole. And in the end, that recognition had made all the difference. As the Unity prepared to jump to its first destination beyond known space, Marcus smiled at the thought that somewhere out there, other small beings on other worlds might be facing ridicule and dismissal, never knowing that their size had nothing to do with their potential. The universe, he had learned, was far too magnificent to be limited by something as trivial as physical stature. "Brother," Silthek's voice came from behind him, the umbral predator using the title that had become common among their unlikely crew. "Are you ready to see what wonders await us?" Marcus nodded, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed distant and cold, but filled with infinite possibility. "Always," he replied. "Always."